Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show 9 times New York Times best-selling author David Bach, who has helped millions of people around the world take action to successfully navigate their path in the financial world. David, real honor to have you.
Well, Doug, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm excited for us to do this podcast today.
So the funny thing that I realized when I was looking at our getting together is that you and I, in fact, have a very, very similar background, having both started on Wall Street around the same time at the same firm.
It really is funny. I mean, so same thing. I trained at the World Trade Center, and I understand you traded the World Trade Center.
That's right.
I still live here in New York. In fact, if I look out my window, I can see now what is the Freedom Tower. But I remember going through training in some ways like it was yesterday on the 67th floor of the World Trade Center.
Yeah, that was quite something. And actually, I got into the business much like you. I was partners originally with my mother, who was at Dean Witter. She'd been there for about 17 years.
Well, and like I was telling you, I was partners with my father. So, and, you know, it sounds like we both grew up very similar because I remember being a little kid going into my dad's office, and he used to work at a company before it was Dean Witter, it was J. Barth and Company.
Wow.
And I remember my job was to go down to the ticker tape and pull the actual stock quotes off the ticker machine, then bring the stock quote back to him. So probably the most people who are going to listen to this have no idea what we're talking about. They don't remember ticker machines, but guys, before there were computers, there was this thing called a ticker tape.
Yeah, it was really something. It's amazing that the markets were able to succeed with such low technology, but in many ways, I think they might have been a little bit cleaner.
Well, that's possible. Things have definitely changed a lot. But listen, it's great to be here with you today, and I'm excited to help you out in any way I can.
Let me touch on a topic which I know you speak a lot about, which is a lot of times people, when they're beginning to prepare for their retirement, well, they only begin to think about it in their 30s or 40s or 50s, and they really begin to think that it's too late. And they run the numbers. They say, gee, in order for me to actually retire successfully, I'll have to save a huge amount every month. How can you help people like this out?
Well, it's funny. So I always say people at 30 think about it. At 40, they worry about it. And at 50, they hyperventilate. So, really, I don't know that people in their 30s typically are thinking a lot about retirement, although maybe more today than they used to because they've watched their parents have such difficulty financially in retirement. I think that's a big motivator for a lot of younger people. But my big message to people all over the world has been it's never too late. Because what I saw really early in my career is that people would come to me, they'd take my investment classes, and they'd come up to me and they'd say, David, I'm 50. I haven't done anything. And I hear I'm going to need $1 million, for example, retirement.
Right.
And when they run their numbers, they're like, I'm going to need to save $20,000 a month. I mean, I'm kind of exaggerating here. But a lot of times the financial planning software that people try to use themselves, it spits back a number that's so big and so impossible that they do nothing. And so I've always chunked it down. And I started with like a very simple thing. Can you save $10 a day? And I did that because one of the classes I was teaching, I had a young man. I call him young now, but he was at the time 52. And his name was Fred. And Fred said to me, I can't save a thing. It's not possible. I'll never catch up. There's no point. And I said, can you save $10 a day? And he looked at me and he's like, well, yeah, I guess I could save $10 a day. And so I said, okay, well, $10 a day is $300 a month. $300 a month over the year is $3,600. That's a lot. Can you get your wife to save $10 a day? And she was working. And he said, yeah, I guess you could save $10 a day. So the two of you then, if you both save $10 a day, now we're at $7,200 a year. Let's run this out for 25 years. Let's put in different compound interest rates, and let's see what it could be worth. And depending on the compound interest rate, it could be worth anywhere from $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. And I said, but that's also without your employer matching your contributions. Because do you have a 401k plan? And he said, yeah, I do. Do they match? Yes, they do. Does your wife have a 401k plan? Well, yeah, she does. Okay, let's run the numbers with the contributions. And we ran the numbers out. And now the numbers, depending on the rate of return, are $500,000, $600,000, or $700,000. And he's like, wow, you know what? I guess there is still hope for me. And I'm like, there is hope for you. Now, the truth is, I bet you can save more than $10 a day. So let's start with $10 a day. And I've always been this guy known for taking the complicated, making it simple so that you can go make it actionable.
Right. I think that's the critical thing, is making it actionable. We're talking with David Bach, who is an action-oriented financial advisor. David, one of the things that you often are quoted about is this concept of the latte factor or the double latte factor. Tell us what that's all about.
Yeah, well, so I'll go again. So much of what happens to me is a result of teaching investment classes. So I was teaching a class specifically for women. It was called Smart Women Finish Rich. And I had that same thing, only in this case, it was a young woman say to me, David, I can't afford to save any money. And by asking her where she spends money throughout her day, I walk up to a chalkboard. Her name was Kim. She said she couldn't save $5 a day, and we started going through her expenses, and every morning she stopped at Starbucks. And in fact, she had a latte in her hand as she was telling me she couldn't save anything. And so I went up to this blackboard because I was in a classroom, and I started writing it all down. Well, okay, how much is your latte? Oh, it's $3.50. What do you get to eat with that? She said a muffin. Okay, that's $5-6. And I kept going through her day, and between lunch and Jamba Juice and all the little things showed her where she was spending small amounts of money that add up to a fortune. And with the latte factor, my original metaphor was, well, if you cut out your coffee and you save $5 a day, you can start to build real wealth. Mm-hmm. And that just became very popular. It's still very popular. People talk about it all over the world. And all it was a metaphor. I wasn't trying to get people to give up their coffee. I'm not picking on Starbucks. I've had no success hurting Starbucks business. It was just getting people to think. I mean, it could be bottled water. It could be cigarettes. It could be eating out. I don't know what it is. I just know that the world is set up to take our money from us a latte at a time, right? Like People Magazine did an article and they said that with me, and it said, "A latte spurned is a fortune earned."
That's a good line.
It's just a metaphor. So looking at where you spend money on little things so that you can start to believe. That's the key thing, Doug. It's about believing that you can take an ordinary income, no matter what you're making, that you're actually making enough to start saving.
Right.
And when people see that trigger, that's where their behavior changes, and that's where their life begins to change.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. There was a book that I was actually just reading called The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. And he speaks about the fact that you have to differentiate between wishful thinking and actually believing you can do something. Wishful thinkers are people who assume that, well, I can buy my Starbucks and I can take the vacations and I can run up a lot of credit card debt and, it'll be okay. But it won't be okay for them. Whereas the people who believe they can do it will find a way to make it work. One of the groups of people, David, that I know you focus on, and frankly, in my own daytime practice as a financial advisor, I've seen really suffering a lot more is that women often are in a position where they were in a relationship where they didn't have control of the money, they didn't earn as much of the money, and they don't really understand the decision-making that really needs to be made, and sometimes they don't even have an equal voice in the partnership. As an advisor, I find this a little bit disheartening, to say the least, but I do want to find ways of helping them. If you had to give one or two suggestions to women, in particular, for how they can make sure they'll have a secure future, what would you suggest?
Sure. So, Doug, the first book I ever wrote, which is still one of my most popular books, is a book called Smart Women Finish Rich. And I wrote that book for my clients originally. Because what happened was, like you, I came into business with a family. I came into business with my father. We had a lot of older clients. And my dad had what I would call a very traditional book of business, where it was typically the man who was meeting with him. The wife was sometimes coming to the meeting, but she wasn't very involved in the financial planning, as you just talked about. And then we started having clients pass away. And always it's the men who pass away. Like 9 out of 10 times it's the man. Because we don't live as long. And women lived, the average age of widowhood is 55 years old. It's been reported that 1 in 4 women are broke within 2 months of their husband passing away because there wasn't enough insurance or enough assets left. And women are going to be retired an average of 20% longer because they live well into their late 80s, now early 90s. So seeing this pain firsthand, I started teaching classes for women. And what I tell all women, and we still teach the same class, Smart Women Finish Rich, we just updated it. We're teaching a class all over the United States right now. We should really bring it to Israel now that I'm saying this to you. What I teach women in these classes is really simple. I don't care what your age is. I don't care what your income is. I don't care who you're married to. You could be married to the local bank president. I don't care if your husband is an estate planning attorney. you need to know what is going on with the money. And ideally, that means that you're actually the one that's meeting with the financial planner and that you are equally involved in any financial decisions, or if anything, you're really the family's CFO. And the reason, and when I say CFO, I don't just mean that you pay the bills. I mean, you really know where all the money's being invested. And there's 3 reasons this is important. Number one, if you are widowed, you're going to have to do it eventually anyway. Like it's expected that 95% of all women that are living will manage their money at some point because they're going to inherit it and they're going to have to, even if they're not managing it now. The second thing is that you got statistically, about 40% of people are divorced. So if you're married, there's a good chance you'll have to manage it once you're divorced. And then the third thing is if you're a successful woman who's working, why would you delegate this? I meet so many successful women that are making more than their husbands, and then they've delegated their financial investment side of their life because they're too busy. And if you're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and you can't spend, an hour a month on your personal financial well-being, you're making a huge mistake. You will pay the consequences later. So it's all about financial empowerment. It's about taking charge, and it starts with education. It starts with listening to a podcast like this, reading a book like Smart Women Finish Rich, taking classes, get knowledgeable about money.
I think that's what I have found. What you're saying, and I may leave off with this point, is that the guests that I've had and the professionals that I've spoken to who I feel really care the most about their clients and helping them along are the ones who really try to educate them the most, because I always tell my clients, listen, I'm not a prophet. I can't tell you which way the stock market's going to go, and I don't know which is going to be the next biggest thing, but I am able to educate you about how you can properly handle your money. And I think that's the type of people that type of client that attract, and obviously the type of person that has been lucky enough to read one of your many books and to hear you all over the place. David, we're just about out of time, but tell me in the last few seconds, how's the best way for people to follow you and follow your work?
Well, great, Doug. First of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. It's been a pleasure to meet you, and I'm excited to be with you. Your listeners, if you're listening right now, you can go to my website, go to finishrich.com. And on my website, you can get more information. You can register for our newsletter, which goes out to hundreds of thousands of people every single month. And all the details about what we do is on that website, finishrich.com. Also Facebook, facebook.com/David
We will
Bach.
put a link to that at the show notes of today's show of GoldsteinOnGelt.com. David Bach, a real pleasure to have you. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world. If you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.